The scent of expensive cleaning products, a sterile mix of citrus and chemicals, always signaled I was home. Not home where my worn armchair and stacks of books waited, but home in the way that mattered for 25 years. Langston Development, a name synonymous with luxury skyscrapers and sprawling urban complexes across Chicago. At 52, Eleanor Vance, wasn't just the chief operating officer. I was the operational heart, the one who made the glittering towers rise from blueprints. My parents owned the majority shares, yes, but I was the architect of the day-to-day. The one who wrestled with zoning boards, negotiated with steel suppliers, and put out the inevitable fires that threatened to engulf multi-million-dollar projects. I'd sacrificed weekends, holidays, even the hazy possibility of a personal life, pouring every ounce of my energy into this place. It was more than a job. It was my legacy, built brick by painstaking brick. That Thursday morning felt like any other. The city hummed outside my office window, a familiar backdrop to the stack of permits and feasibility studies on my desk. I was scheduled for what I believed was a routine executive strategy review, prepping the final numbers on the new Lakeshore Tower project, my baby, the one I'd spent the last 3 years shepherding from concept to breaking ground next spring. I clicked through the polished concrete halls, my heels clicking a steady, confident rhythm, a sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. Security nodded. The front desk offered a polite smile. I pushed open the heavy glass door to the main conference room, expecting the usual collection of department heads, maybe a board member or two. What I saw stopped me dead in the doorway. It wasn't the sparse, functional setup of a strategy review. The room was decorated. Gold and black balloons clustered in the corners. An elaborate floral arrangement of ostentatious lilies, Mother's favorite, of course, dominated the center of the polished mahogany table. A banner, hung slightly askew, shimmered with gold glitter, a new era of leadership. Cupcakes and champagne flutes sat on a side credenza, untouched but sparkling under the recessed lighting. My stomach plummeted. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Around the table sat the usual suspects, the head of legal, the CFO, a few familiar, stony faces from the board. My parents were there, perched at the head of the table, radiating an unsettling mix of forced cheerfulness and blatant discomfort. And then I saw him. Marcus, my younger brother. He was standing near the podium, looking entirely too pleased with himself, dressed in a suit that screamed, expensive, poorly chosen stylist. Marcus, the golden boy, the one who'd bounced from one failed startup to another, funded generously by Dad each time. He hadn't set foot in a Langston office in years, except for the annual holiday party to collect his bonus check. Eleanor. So glad you could make it. Mother's voice cut through the strange tableau, overly bright, brittle. I managed to find my voice, though it sounded alien. I didn't realize this was anything but the Lakeshore Review. Father cleared his throat, rising slowly. He avoided my eyes. Today marks a pivotal moment for Langston Development. After much consideration, we are proud to announce a change in leadership. Marcus will be taking over as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. A scattering of applause, awkward and sparse, filled the room. I stood frozen, the hum of the city outside suddenly a million miles away. CEO? Marcus? Without a word? Not a phone call, not an email, not even a forwarded meeting invite that mentioned this. Marcus stepped up to the podium, beaming. He adjusted the microphone, a small, self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's suit. Thank you, Father. I'm honored to take the helm. I believe that to stay competitive, Langston needs a bold, fresh perspective. Streamlining operations, cutting dead weight. He paused, his gaze flicking directly to me for a fraction of a second, the smile never leaving his face. This means some difficult decisions regarding existing roles. My breath hitched. Dead weight? 25 years. Countless all-nighters. Every major project finished on time and under budget for the last decade. Dead weight. Alicia, the head of HR, a woman I had hired and mentored, approached me quietly, a manila folder in her hands. Her face was pale, her eyes full of pity that felt like an insult. I didn't need to open it. The folder, still warm from the printer, had my name typed neatly at the top. Below it, the word termination. Stamped, stark, final. Marcus finished his rehearsed speech to another smattering of applause. He walked towards me, the confidence in his stride unnerving. He leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially, though I knew some around the table were watching. Nothing personal, Eleanor. It's just business. The future. He patted the folder in my hand. Your services are no longer needed. Nothing personal? This was personal. Every missed birthday, every postponed vacation, every single time I chose work over anything else. That was personal. I had poured my life into this company. I had negotiated the deals that kept us afloat during the 2008 crash. I had personally vouched for lines of credit when the banks were tight. I bled Langston. And he was telling me it wasn't personal? I clenched my jaw, forcing back the hot sting of tears. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I took the folder, the flimsy severance offer inside a final insult, and turned on my heel, walking out the door as the polite applause for Marcus's ascension started again. The hallway stretched endlessly, the click of my heels echoing too loudly in the sudden silence. I reached the elevator bank and swiped my key card for my floor. The light turned red. Access denied. My heart hammered against my ribs. Not even an hour. Not even a chance to clean out my office myself. As the elevator doors opened, a young administrative assistant, barely out of college, someone I often grabbed coffee with, was standing there with a box. A box labeled clearly with my name. My office box. Through the packing paper, I could see the corner of my favorite World's Okayest mug, a gift from my team. The framed photo of me and Dad breaking ground on our first high-rise project years ago. They had already packed my life into a cardboard box. It had been planned. This elaborate farce, the meeting, the speech, the prepared box, it had all been orchestrated long before I walked through that door. I took the box from the assistant. She wouldn't meet my eyes. They asked me to bring it down. I know, I said, my voice flat. Thank you, Kathy. She mumbled something unintelligible and hurried away. Outside, the Chicago sun felt too bright, too cheerful. I sat in my car, the box on the passenger seat, the termination folder beside it. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. The city traffic moved around me, a blur of sound and color I couldn't process. I drove home on autopilot. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The answering machine blinked messages I didn't care about. I sat on the sofa for a long time, the box staring at me from the floor. Finally, I got up and started unpacking. It felt surreal, pulling out items that had been part of my daily life for decades. My ergonomic mouse, a stress ball shaped like a miniature skyscraper, pens, notebooks, a worn copy of the city's zoning codes. It was like sifting through the remnants of someone else's life. My fingers brushed against something hard tucked beneath a stack of old reports at the very bottom of the box. An envelope. Plain, cream-colored, sealed. No name, no address, just a single handwritten word in neat cursive. Eleanor. It hadn't been there when Kathy handed me the box. It must have been slipped in later, perhaps by someone who couldn't bear to see me walk away empty-handed, someone who knew. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside wasn't more HR paperwork. It was a single sheet of thick, heavy paper, embossed with the letterhead of a small, reputable law firm on the north side, one we sometimes used for specialized contracts, not the big corporate firm Langston usually employed. It was a contract, dated 12 years ago. My heart began to pound, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. 12 years ago. That was the year of the market collapse. The year Langston Development nearly went under. We were drowning in debt. Banks were calling in loans. Projects were stalled. My parents were paralyzed by panic. Marcus was, wherever Marcus was, failing at some tech startup. I was the one who crisscrossed the country, begging lenders, finding private investors, leveraging every contact I had. And when that wasn't enough, I did something drastic. I took out a second mortgage on my apartment building, I liquidated my retirement savings, and I secured a massive personal bridge loan, wiring the funds late one desperate night to cover payroll and prevent foreclosure on our most valuable undeveloped properties. I remembered the lawyer, old Mr. Henderson, Dad's childhood friend, brought in because our usual corporate lawyers were tied up or unwilling to take on the risk. He drafted this document quickly. My parents were reluctant, but I'd insisted. If I'm putting my personal security on the line, I'd told them, my voice firm despite the exhaustion, I need more than a handshake. I need insurance. I read the key clauses now, the words jumping off the page. It wasn't just a loan agreement. It was a supplemental founder's agreement. It stipulated that in recognition of my crucial, personal financial intervention and ongoing operational leadership, I was granted a 15% non-dilutable equity stake in Langston Development, fully vested, with explicit voting rights and the power to call a shareholder meeting or initiate an independent audit in the event of my unilateral removal from the company's executive leadership. 15%. Non-dilutable. Power. They hadn't just fired me. They had tried to erase the woman who saved their company, thinking she had no leverage. They assumed I'd forgotten about this document, that it was lost in a box somewhere, that I was still the loyal daughter who would walk away quietly to avoid a scene, even if it meant giving up everything I built. They were wrong. So incredibly, spectacularly wrong. A different kind of tear welled in my eyes now, not from pain, but from a sudden fierce surge of adrenaline and grim satisfaction. I looked at the contract again, tracing the notarized seal, my own signature next to my father's and mother's, confirming their agreement under duress. They had signed this. They knew. And they thought I wouldn't remember. This wasn't heartbreak. This was a declaration of war. I needed more than just this document. I needed proof of their deception, proof of my years of work, proof of Marcus's inadequacy and potential malfeasance. I got up, the tiredness falling away. My apartment might be quiet, but my mind was buzzing with renewed purpose. The box lay open on the floor, no longer a symbol of my dismissal, but a potential goldmine of evidence. I knelt down and began sifting through it again, this time with a hunter's eye. Old laptops, external hard drives, USB sticks accumulated over 2 decades. I started plugging them in, sifting through files. Marketing decks I'd personally overhauled at 3 a.m. Payroll reports with my digital signature approving every salary. Investment memos with my annotations in the margins. Financial statements from that critical year, showing the influx of my personal funds. It was all here, a digital breadcrumb trail of my indispensability. Then I found it, tucked inside an old project folder labeled Market Crash Bailout, Urgent, on a dusty external drive. A small audio file. Curiosity piqued, I clicked play. My mother's voice filled the room, crisp and clear. Marcus is ready now. Eleanor has been good, yes, but she's too set in her ways. Not the fresh face we need for the public eye. Then Marcus. Smug. Arrogant. She's also a liability, frankly. Too emotional. Remember how she reacted during that supplier dispute? And she's been checked out lately. Always distracted with her personal issues. My blood ran cold. Personal issues. They were talking about the 6 months I'd spent caring for my partner, Sarah, during her brutal battle with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. I had worked remotely, answering emails during chemotherapy sessions, taking calls from hospital waiting rooms, keeping the Lakeshore Tower project on track while my world was falling apart. They knew. They knew exactly what I was going through. And they painted it as checked out, as personal issues that made me a liability. My father's voice, hesitant. But she saved us during the crash, and the Lakeshore project is hers. Mother cut him off, sharp. That was years ago. And the project can be reassigned. Marcus needs this opportunity. He's family. And honestly, Eleanor's stake, it's complicated. Better if she's just gone. Just gone. Like erasing a mistake on a spreadsheet. The audio file clicked off. I sat in the silence, the sterile scent of my apartment suddenly suffocating. There was no doubt now. This wasn't a simple change in leadership. This was a calculated, cruel betrayal, years in the making, exploiting my most vulnerable moment. They didn't just want to fire me. They wanted to bury me. But you can't bury the foundation. I started copying files, creating a new folder on my encrypted drive. I labeled it Phoenix. Everything went in the contract scan, the audio file, financial records, project documents, emails. Every single breadcrumb I could find. Late that night, my phone buzzed. An email notification. Subject: they're making a mistake. We should talk. Clark Peterson, our chief accountant. Quiet, meticulous, had been with Langston almost as long as I had. He saw everything, said nothing, just crunched numbers. I typed a reply instantly. Where and when? Your place. An hour later, I was sitting in Clark's small, slightly cluttered living room. The air smelled faintly of old paper and instant coffee. Stacks of files and a couple of external hard drives sat on his coffee table. Clark looked weary. His shoulders slumped more than usual. They told me to delete everything, he said, his voice low. Board minutes, financial records, your access logs, emails, anything that showed your authority, your contributions. Especially anything about that agreement from 12 years ago. My stomach tightened. They knew about the agreement? He nodded, running a hand over the files. Marcus asked about it explicitly. Said it was a loose end. They assumed it was lost, or that you wouldn't fight it. Said you were too loyal for that. He snorted softly. Loyalty. Funny word coming from them. He slid his laptop towards me. A folder was open on the screen. Records _deleted. He clicked on an audio file. It was another conversation, clearer this time, recorded maybe from a phone left on speaker during a private meeting. Mother's voice again. And the optics are better with Marcus. A strong young man at the helm. Eleanor, she's reached her ceiling. Frankly, she lacks a certain polish. Marcus chimed in. She's too hands-on, micromanages everything. We need someone who delegates, someone who can play the game. She's too sincere. It's off-putting to potential investors. My father's voice sounding resigned now. And her personal situation makes her unpredictable. We need stability. Unpredictable. Because I was juggling corporate demands with watching the woman I loved fight for her life. Polish? Sincere? The qualities they once praised as dedication and integrity were now liabilities. Diane clicked off the recording. They offered me a substantial bonus to make sure nothing was traceable, he said. Figured I'm just the numbers guy. Quiet, compliant. He looked me in the eye. I couldn't do it, Eleanor. Not to you. Not after everything you did for this company, for them. He then showed me something else. A scanned document, tucked away in a folder labeled Project Nightingale, a code name for a major new development. It was the partnership agreement I'd felt was off. My signature was on it. But as Diane zoomed in, the subtle differences were clear. The slant was slightly wrong, the loop on the A was messy, not my usual precise curl. It was a forgery. And this agreement committed Langston Development to a joint venture that looked shady. Something that benefited Marcus's offshore accounts, not the company. And my forged signature made it look like I had approved it, potentially making me complicit. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just firing me. This was setting me up. Exposing this would not only ruin Marcus and my parents, but it could drag me down too. Implicate me in financial misconduct I knew nothing about. Who? I whispered, the word burning my throat. Diane hesitated. It looks like Marcus's work. But your mother's handwriting is on the sticky note attached to the scan file. Eleanor signed this ASAP. She was clearly involved. I stood up, pacing Clark's small living room. Each step was deliberate, measured. My mind was racing. Forgery. Fraud. Using my personal crisis against me. Deleting records. This was a criminal conspiracy. Do you have originals? I asked. Diane nodded towards the files on the table. Everything. I kept parallel records. Just in case. Guilt, fear. I don't know. I just knew it was wrong. You've done more than enough, Clark. Thank you, I said, my voice firm. If they come after you, I'll protect you. He looked doubtful. They're powerful, Eleanor. Not as powerful as the truth, I said, gathering the USB drives Diane handed me. And not as powerful as the woman they tried to bury. As I left Diane's apartment building, the city lights blurred slightly. The numb shock was gone, replaced by a cold, hard determination. They wanted a war? They had one. Back in my apartment, I connected Diane's drives to my encrypted system. More files poured into the Phoenix folder, meeting minutes explicitly stating my 15% stake in rights, original loan documents co-signed by me personally, audited financials from that bailout year proving my contribution, scans of the forged document, the damning audio files. I opened my LinkedIn profile. It had been dormant for years. Another casualty of focusing solely on the company, on not rocking the boat, on loyalty. Within minutes of reactivating it, notifications flooded in: old colleagues, industry contacts, recruiters. But one message made me pause. Subject: Hey stranger. Still got that spark? Might have a proposition. It was from David Chen. David had been a rising star at Langston years ago, a brilliant developer, before he'd left quietly to start his own boutique firm. He was one of the few people who had seen my contributions, not just my title. He saw me. His message continued: saw the news. Not surprised, but disappointed in them. Always knew who the real engine was behind those projects. Let's talk. Building something new. Your name on the door. Full partner. A new horizon. Not just reclaiming my past, but building a future. A future entirely my own. That night, back in my apartment, instead of dwelling on the betrayal I worked, I drafted a formal letter to the Langston Development Board, invoking the clause in my supplemental founders agreement, requesting a special shareholder meeting within 10 days to address breaches of fiduciary duty and potential criminal misconduct by current leadership. I attached a scanned copy of the agreement. Then, I drafted a separate, certified letter to Marcus and my parents, informing them I was aware of the forged document related to Project Nightingale and had evidence. I stated that any attempt to execute that partnership agreement based on the forged signature would be met with immediate legal action and reporting to the appropriate regulatory and law enforcement agencies. I didn't accuse them directly of forgery in this letter, just put them on notice that I knew about it and had proof it wasn't my signature. It was a strategic warning shot. I didn't send them yet. Not quite. I needed one more piece in place. I contacted David the next morning. We met in a quiet cafe, the antithesis of the opulent corporate spaces I was used to. David was sharp, empathetic, and his offer was real. He wasn't just offering me a job, he was offering me a partnership, a chance to build something together, something clean and innovative, free from toxic family dynamics. He understood my need for justice, but also saw the potential for a powerful new venture. We can build bigger, better, cleaner, he said, his eyes earnest. Let them flounder in the past. Accepting David's offer felt like breathing fresh air after being trapped underground. It gave me leverage beyond just my contract. It gave me options. It meant I wasn't fighting just to get back into a company that had betrayed me. I was fighting to expose their wrongdoing and launch something that would dwarf them. That afternoon, I went to the county clerk's office. The woman behind the counter was bored, processing stacks of paperwork. I presented the original supplemental founders agreement, along with a document drafted with the help of a lawyer David recommended, a formal notice, filed with the state, confirming my vested ownership stake and, crucially, filing a revocation of any power of attorney or implicit authority granted to Marcus based on his CEO appointment, citing my existing rights as outlined in the 15% ownership agreement. It was a legal technicality, a move designed to cripple his ability to make major decisions or access certain funds/assets without my explicit consent, which was now revoked. The woman barely looked up as she stamped the papers. Filed, she said flatly. Effective immediately. As I turned to leave, she called out, "You sure this won't stir anything up?" I didn't look back. "That's the point," I said softly, stepping out into the bright Chicago afternoon. The first domino had fallen. I spent the next few days quietly solidifying my position. Sent the letter to the board. Sent the warning letter to Marcus and my parents about the forgery. Finalized the partnership agreement with David. Secured all my physical evidence, hard drives, original contract, Diane's copies, in a safe deposit box. I waited. The response came quickly. Not a formal reply to my letter, but frantic phone calls from mother, then father, then Marcus. I ignored them all. They also tried to freeze my personal assets linked to the company, but my preemptive legal filing blocked them. They were scrambling. They knew I had them. Then came the invitations. Not to an official meeting, but to a lavish charity gala the firm was sponsoring. The Langston Legacy Gala. Marcus's name was plastered everywhere as the host, the new visionary. It was clearly designed to be his coronation, a public display of his leadership and the firm's bright future under his command. My invitation, naturally, had been rescinded, but I knew exactly where I needed to be. I chose my outfit carefully, a charcoal gray power suit that felt like armor. I looked in the mirror, no longer seeing the tired, betrayed woman from a week ago. I saw the architect, the survivor, the woman who held the blueprint to their downfall. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of a downtown hotel, dripping with chandeliers and filled with Chicago's elite, investors, clients, rivals. As I stepped out of the elevator, a hush fell over the immediate vicinity. Heads turned. Whispers started. I wasn't on the guest list, but my name was legend in these circles, the woman who really built Langston, suddenly and mysteriously gone. I moved through the crowd with deliberate calm, a ghost haunting their party. I saw my parents first. Their faces, moments before radiating confident smiles, froze. Then Marcus. He was on stage, preparing to give his keynote speech. When he saw me, his eyes widened, a flicker of pure panic crossing his face before he masked it with a strained smile. He began his speech, his voice smooth but with an undercurrent of tension I could now hear clearly. He spoke of innovation, of the future, of leaving behind the past. He even made a veiled reference to necessary changes that were difficult but vital. His eyes found mine in the crowd, a silent challenge. I didn't flinch. I raised the glass of champagne a passing waiter had offered me and held his gaze, a small, cold smile on my lips. It wasn't the smile of a defeated woman. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret, a devastating secret, and was about to detonate it. As Marcus wrapped up his speech to polite applause, I didn't join in. I simply held my ground, radiating quiet confidence. People were starting to crowd around him, offering congratulations. But I could see him, distracted, his eyes scanning the room, his hand subtly reaching for his phone in his pocket. He was checking if the filing had hit, if his access was still valid, if his little world was still intact. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew the sound of his panic, the frantic whispers to my parents, the hurried calls to lawyers. Somewhere, in the complex digital architecture of Langston Development, systems were locking him out. Accounts he thought were under his control were suddenly inaccessible. Decisions he tried to push through were being rejected. My legal filing, based on the forgotten contract, combined with the hint of regulatory action over the forgery, was taking effect. I saw a board member approach Marcus, looking grave. I couldn't hear their words over the din of the party, but I saw the board member hold up their hands, a gesture of futility. Marcus's face crumpled. The carefully constructed facade of the golden boy shattered, revealing the scared, incompetent child beneath. I turned to leave. My mission was accomplished. The truth was out. The wheels of justice, or at least consequence, were turning. I didn't need to see the full meltdown. As I walked towards the exit, Marcus suddenly burst through the crowd, his face red with rage and panic. He stormed towards me, heedless of the onlookers. "You," he hissed, stopping just inches away. "What did you do?" "My access is gone. The accounts are frozen." I met his furious gaze, my expression calm. "I simply invoked my rights, Marcus. The ones your father and mother signed 12 years ago. The ones you thought were obsolete. You can't do this. I'm the CEO. I'm in charge." "Not anymore," I said softly. "And about that forged signature on the Nightingale agreement? I've made sure the proper authorities have copies, along with the recordings of you calling me obsolete and distracted while I was caring for Sarah." His face went ashen. The color drained completely. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. My parents rushed up, pulling at his arm, their faces a mask of horror and fury directed at me. "Eleanor, how dare you?" Mother shrieked. "This stays in the family," Father pleaded, finally looking me in the eye, desperation replacing his usual avoidance. I shook my head. "It stopped being in the family the moment you tried to erase me. The moment you used Sarah's illness against me. The moment you let him forge my name and set me up." I looked at Marcus, then at my parents. "You didn't just fire an employee. You attacked one of the founders. You committed fraud. And you forgot that the woman you tried to bury was the one who laid the foundation. I turned and walked away, leaving them in the middle of their ruined gala, their whispers turning into panicked shouting. The air outside felt cool and clean. I hadn't gotten my old job back, and I didn't want it. But I had exposed their deceit, protected my name, and ensured that the company I helped build wouldn't be ruined by incompetence and corruption. My phone buzzed. It was David. Heard things are getting interesting at the Langston Gala. The text read, "Ready to build something real?" I smiled. It was a real smile this time. "More than ready," I typed back. They wanted someone obsolete, someone who lacked polish, someone who could be easily erased. They wanted to rewrite the legacy. But they forgot one vital thing. You can't rewrite the past when the architect keeps the original blueprints. And sometimes, the woman they tried to bury rises, not just from the ashes, but to build something entirely new and far more powerful. My legacy wasn't ending tonight. It was just beginning.